Women have it easy. Just say you're going through menopause, and you can take a break from work and chores.
I couldn't hide my intense anger at my husband Elliot's words right in front of me. The changes that started appearing in my body after I turned 50? It was 2 years ago when I was diagnosed with menopause. For these 2 years, I've been suffering from various symptoms, like dizziness, palpitations, and hot flashes. Even though I'm receiving treatment at the hospital, it's only easing the symptoms, not curing them. Despite living in the same house and seeing my condition, Elliot has never tried to understand my illness.
Dizziness? Easily tired. Back pain? Everyone gets that when they get older. And you, calling it menopause or whatever, taking off work, and just sleeping all day at home. Wow, I'm jealous.
Elliot hurled these words at me, unable to even stand up due to my dizziness. He maliciously perceived my decision to take a leave of absence, advised by the doctor, as taking advantage of a trivial illness. Elliot has repeatedly hurled insults and sarcasm at my illness that shows no signs of healing. But this day was different. Elliot looked down at me with a look of utter disgust and laughed nastily.
If you have the time to show off how hard your illness is, why don't you at least do the housework a wife should do?
I am Anita, 52 years old. I live with my husband Elliot, who is 3 years older than me. Elliot and I met through a common acquaintance in our late 20s and immediately hit it off. We continued to date smoothly and got married in our early 30s. We had occasional minor fights, but Elliot was kind, and we managed to live a peaceful life while working hard at our jobs. We don't have children, but I believe we've always been supportive and close as a couple. However, a significant change appeared in our marriage a few years ago. I continued to work as a full-time employee even after marriage, but currently I'm on a leave of absence. The reason is poor health. More specifically, I started experiencing symptoms of menopause in my late 40s, which made me prone to falling ill. Initially, it was mainly irregular menstrual cycles and sudden feelings of heat and fatigue. But as time passed, the symptoms worsened with severe palpitations and sleepless nights. Gradually, I began to feel irritable and depressed for no apparent reason, affecting my mental health. Menopause can bring various symptoms for about 10 years, from before to after menopause. I had heard about it, but experiencing it myself was more challenging than I had imagined. My symptoms were particularly severe, and despite the advice of my family, the condition didn't improve even after visiting the hospital. The doctor said that there is no specific cure for menopause, and symptomatic treatment is the primary approach. So I've been using prescribed medication and herbal remedies tailored to my severe symptoms. But there's no cure. It became difficult to continue working, so I decided to take a leave of absence when I turned 50, 2 years ago. My company's leave policy is up to 3 years, and soon I will have to decide whether to return to work or retire. I don't want to quit my job, but there's no sign of my symptoms subsiding, and I feel frustrated about possibly having to consider retirement. However, if I end up quitting, I have no idea what Elliot would say. Initially, when I started suffering from menopause, Elliot was concerned and attentive. He wasn't the type to take the lead in household chores, but he used to care when I was unwell. I thought he was a kind person, but as soon as he realized my health issue might drag on, he started looking at me with irritation. When I discussed taking a temporary leave from work with Elliot, he didn't like the idea.
I don't understand much about your health, but is it so bad that you need to take a leave? You're not just slacking off and relaxing at home, right?
I was shocked when he said that. Men also go through menopause, but Elliot, despite having a chronic illness, rarely fell ill. He's always been careful to maintain his health to prevent his condition from worsening, so he probably sees me, who continues to be unwell, as lazy. That's evident from how he responds no matter how much I explain my symptoms.
So what's the plan to improve? If that method doesn't work, shouldn't you look for another? Why do you keep saying it's not getting better? If it's not healing, find a way to heal.
He seemed far from understanding, but continuing to work in my current condition is tough. When I pleaded for a leave of absence until my health stabilized, Elliot, as expected, got furious. However, after I told him that not only my boss, but also my colleagues and juniors had asked me to take a break, he reluctantly agreed, though still displeased. I had decided to do more housework while not working, but there were times when I suddenly felt ill and couldn't get up. Standing brought on dizziness, and even sitting down didn't stop the sweating, perhaps due to hot flashes. Still, when I tried to vacuum, despite the difficulty, merciless back pain would strike. No matter how much I endured and took medicine, trying to do housework whenever I could move a bit, Elliot still didn't understand.
Aren't you better yet? What's the point of going to the hospital?
It was predictable, but gradually he began to treat me coldly.
Stop being so dependent. If you're at home all day because of your leave, why don't you finish all the housework during the day? It's not like you're unwell from morning till night. Coming home to no greeting, dinner just cut up and heated up. What are you doing at home all day?
And it wasn't just once or twice that I got such complaints from Elliot when he returned from work. I was shocked by his attitude, sighing tiredly. On weekends, when he was at home,
stop lying down all the time. Do the laundry at least.
And I was feeling unwell and lying down. I even got yelled at. The sarcasm and complaints from Elliot increased day by day, and words of care and concern disappeared. While his terrible attitude hurt me, I also increasingly worried whether my symptoms would ever heal, if a time would come when I really got better. However, fortunately, my mother-in-law Cassie and sister-in-law Natalie, who lived in the same town, understood my condition and sometimes gave me advice, which was very helpful. Cassie is over 80, but still robust and lively, speaking clearly and energetically. Her husband has passed away, and she lives with Natalie and her husband. Cassie and Natalie were the ones who advised me to go to the hospital and were the first to suggest taking a leave if it got too bad. I'm truly grateful to them, as both my parents have passed away, and they're the ones who care about my menopausal symptoms. One day,
we're going to have a dinner party at our house next weekend for Mom's birthday,
Elliot said. In Elliot's family, it's tradition once childhood to have a big dinner party for family birthdays. Since marrying Elliot, I've participated every year. Depending on the year, we either went out for dinner or had a party at the in-laws' house. But this year, Cassie's birthday celebration was to be held at our place. Of course, that meant I was in charge of the meal. On the day, Cassie and Natalie were supposed to come in the evening, and Natalie's husband couldn't make it due to work.
Make sure you're in good shape on the day,
Elliot said, glaring at me sharply.
I won't tolerate it if it's like last year.
I understand. I could only nod in front of Elliot's aggressive attitude. Last year, on Cassie's birthday, I felt ill and missed the party at the in-laws' house. Elliot seemed to think he was made a fool of and berated me harshly when he returned home. I remember crying from the pain of that time. So this time, I want to be in good condition on the day of the dinner, as Elliot said. However, if it were a condition that could be controlled just by wanting it, I wouldn't have been suffering for years. Hoping for a day when I felt a little better, I started preparing little by little. Cassie would be turning 85 at her next birthday. Wanting to show my gratitude for all she has done, I vowed to pour my soul into preparing dinner for everyone. With the in-laws coming over, there was a lot to do besides preparing the meal. Elliot has a bit of a show-off side, so he wouldn't be satisfied unless the entire house was cleaned from corner to corner. I cleaned the house meticulously over several days, consulting my physical condition. Elliot didn't help with the housework at all, just relaxing in the living room, but I was used to it. It seems that younger people nowadays do housework, but in Elliot's generation, housework is a wife's job. Especially since Elliot, who thinks I'm just lazing around at home all day, wouldn't help. Then, after finishing the shopping for the dinner party the day before, I went to bed early. I closed my eyes, praying it was just a mild symptom. However, on the day of the dinner party, I had the worst timing, as I suffered from a terrible headache and dizziness right from the morning. When I tried to get out of bed, my vision blurred, and I had to close my eyes involuntarily. Then, I heard a violent ringing in my ears, and felt as if my head was being beaten with severe pain. It was especially bad, even for my recent condition. Still, I managed to get out of bed clumsily, only to be greeted by Elliot's loud sigh from above. When he realized I couldn't possibly prepare breakfast, he grabbed his wallet and phone and headed for the door. And then,
I'm going to grab some food. And since I feel sick around you, I'll go to Mom's place early. Make sure you have dinner ready when we get back.
He said coldly and left the house. Sure, today was the day Elliot planned to pick up Cassie and Natalie, but dropping by this afternoon must be an inconvenience for them too. His harsh words hurt me, but I couldn't stay down forever. I just drank some jelly drink, took my medicine, and laid down in the living room until my condition settled. But my health hardly improved by the afternoon. The medication eased the headache, but standing up caused dizziness and made me stagger. I needed to start preparing dinner, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I stood in the kitchen for short periods, taking breaks, but time was relentlessly approaching. Feeling at my limit, I tried calling Elliot, but there was no answer. So I sent him a text, but he didn't reply. Eventually, it was 5 p.m., and I was still halfway done when Elliot returned home with Cassie and the others. Elliot, entering the living room, looked at me sitting in the kitchen with a puzzled expression.
No welcome for Mom and the others? Is dinner ready? Nothing is set up,
he said, and I was at a loss for words. The bread was baked, and I had torn some leafy vegetables and added tomatoes, making a salad. But that was about all I had prepared. The thought of being scolded again made my heart race and breathing difficult, but I decided to apologize and tell the truth. Elliot, I'm sorry. This is all I could do. I'm sorry, but could you please order something nice for the main course? I'm really sorry, I said. And Elliot's face turned red as he changed his attitude dramatically.
Are you kidding me with this sickness act now? We were looking forward to this dinner. Mom was so excited. And here you are, making me look bad again, just like last year.
Elliot shouted angrily at me. It's not that. I'm not trying to.
Isn't it obvious? You can't even manage your own health at your age. It's pathetic. You make everyone else suffer because of your own problems.
Elliot continued to berate me without listening. Then why didn't you answer the phone? I sent you a text to eat out. I even sent another text 3 minutes ago for delivery. Why do you insist on eating at home when you don't do anything? My frustration exploded, and I shouted back loudly. Each word I spoke felt like my head was being hit with a metal bat. My vision was so blurred, I could hardly see Elliot's face. I couldn't hear anything over my own voice and heartbeat, and I was sweating profusely from the heat. The symptoms I had been managing with medication all came back stronger, and I regretted not keeping quiet, but I couldn't help but tell Elliot. When my vision finally cleared a bit and I caught Elliot's gaze, he was staring at me in stunned silence with his mouth open. Then, as our eyes met, his face turned bright red and he pointed at me angrily.
What's with that attitude? Pretending to be sick and not doing housework? And getting angry when pointed out? You're the worst. I'm sick of supporting a wife who's a failure at housekeeping. If you can't handle housework, we're getting a divorce.
He yelled loud enough to be heard outside. All my desperate pleading had no effect on Elliot. After all these years, he brought up divorce without hesitation, and I felt so miserable I was on the verge of tears. Divorce seemed inevitable. I was about to reply in agreement when I heard light footsteps, but Elliot, in his rage, probably didn't notice.
Menopause. What's that about? Getting tired easily? Having shoulder pains? Aren't these things normal for our age? Dizziness and headaches can't be that bad, even with medication. You just want to lie in bed all day, don't you?
Elliot spat these words at me before someone tapped him on the shoulder from behind. It was Natalie, my sister-in-law. With an anger I'd never seen before, Natalie raised her right hand the moment Elliot turned around and struck his cheek with a forceful slap. Elliot, hit by a right straight punch that was hard to believe came from a 60-year-old woman, fell to the floor, looking up at Natalie with a face that couldn't comprehend what had just happened.
Sis, what the heck are you doing?
Elliot, rubbing his cheek in confusion, was met with Natalie's sharp gaze. Then she said, And what about you? What's with the attitude? Have you been treating Anita like this for years? Deciding the severity of someone's illness without being a doctor?
Verbally abusing your wife? You should be ashamed.
Natalie shouted, furious. Elliot, who tries to show a good face in front of the family, doesn't treat me harshly. Even when he was despising me with disdainful eyes as I suffered from dizziness, he became considerate of my health the moment Natalie visited, even making coffee himself. I had consulted Cassie and Natalie about my illness, but never about Elliot's behavior. They are caring people, but if I spoke ill of Elliot, their blood relative, they might harbor ill will towards me. They haven't seen how Elliot treats me harshly, so they might not believe me. Even if they did believe and sympathize, I couldn't speak out, thinking of how Elliot might attack me afterwards. But seeing Natalie's actions now, I might have been wrong.
What's going on? Today is Mom's birthday party, and I wanted to make it enjoyable. But it's this guy who ruined the dinner party by not preparing anything.
Elliot, standing up, pointed at me and continued to blame. Then Cassie, who came to the living room with Natalie, glared at Elliot.
Are you saying Anita ruined the dinner party? That's just your opinion, right? From what I heard, Anita was trying her best to prepare despite her pain. She contacted you because it didn't seem like she could make it in time, asking to change the venue or order delivery. I don't appreciate being celebrated by someone who's unwell. I'm not even slightly happy being celebrated by a son who just complains after dumping everything on his sick wife.
Cassie said this to Elliot firmly. Then Natalie.
Did you come to our house leaving Anita alone while she was feeling ill?
Asked.
Well, there's nothing I could do.
There are many things you could do, like helping with chores or being considerate about her health. I remember telling you this when Anita started feeling unwell. You just found it bothersome, didn't you? Stung by Natalie's words, Elliot was at a loss for words. After I started feeling unwell, Natalie had told Elliot to be more considerate of me. But as his usual behavior showed, he didn't heed her words.
Why are Sis and Mom siding with her? Menopause isn't even a real illness. Getting tired easily, palpitations that happens to everyone as they age. Women just want to be lazy, so they can name it a disorder and pretend to be sick.
Elliot continued, trying to justify himself. Natalie sighed and began to explain. Elliot, you might not know, but I too suffered from severe menopause symptoms. It's only recently settled down, but it was so bad I quit my job 10 years ago. Are you really saying a disease that made me quit my job isn't a real illness? Hearing Natalie's words, Elliot stood frozen in shock. When I first started showing symptoms of menopause, I talked to Natalie and learned that she had suffered from menopausal disorders around the same age as me, and eventually had to resign from her job after a temporary leave. She didn't want to quit, but as there was no sign of recovery, she decided to put her health first after consulting with her family. I knew Natalie had quit her job around 50, but I didn't know the reason until she told me herself. Come to think of it, I had met Natalie around that time. We basically communicated via text, as she couldn't meet due to her poor health. It was really tough back then. I thought it would never get better, but Stanley told me to quit my job and take a rest. Stanley is Natalie's husband. He's 5 years younger than Natalie, and his job has irregular hours and night shifts, so he couldn't make it to the dinner. Though we don't meet often, I remember him as a kind man who always cares about my health. Natalie, with such a gentle husband, pleaded desperately with Elliot. Anita is not your servant. Shouldn't you, as a husband, have more compassion?
Sorry, Sis. I knew you were unwell before, but I didn't know it was for that reason.
Elliot replied, sounding like an excuse, but Natalie's expression remained stern. Right now, it's not about me. Shouldn't you be apologizing to Anita, not me? Natalie said firmly, and Elliot reluctantly turned to face me. Elliot loves Natalie, so he usually can't go against what she says. Eventually, he gave up and apologized to me.
I'm sorry. Sis scolded me, and it opened my eyes. From now on, I'll help you, Anita, and we'll get along.
He said sincerely, looking into my eyes, and I thought he finally understood. I was about to forgive Elliot when... Hold on a minute. A voice interjected. It was Cassie. Looking tired from standing, she came to the sofa supported by Natalie and sat next to me. She looked me in the eye and said,
Anita, you can't believe Elliot's words. You should divorce him quickly.
What? What do you mean? I asked in surprise, and Cassie shared a past experience.
Actually, I suffered from similar symptoms around your age. There wasn't a name like menopausal disorder back then, but from what you've told me, I think I probably had it too. I've told you this before, haven't I?
I nodded slightly to Cassie's words. When Cassie was around my age, the term menopausal disorder was not widely recognized. There were no medications, and it was hard to get understanding from others. Cassie chuckled sadly and pointed at Elliot.
Elliot used to hurl terrible abuses at me when I was suffering. It was around the time before he married you, I think. He was living at his parents' house and would say things like, "Make dinner faster. How long will you lie in bed, mother? Stop pretending to be sick." Such heartless words.
Cassie's face looked pained, as if remembering those times. Elliot, is that true? I asked Elliot, wanting to believe him, but he awkwardly turned away. His silence and lack of denial meant that everything Cassie said was true. Cassie looked down, sorrowfully, and continued.
My late husband got so angry at Elliot's behavior back then that he hit him. And when Dad scolded him severely, Elliot said the exact same thing he's saying now. He woke up. Indeed, after that, Elliot stopped saying anything to me, because he quickly married you and left home. But Anita, you've been mistreated by him, haven't you? In other words, Elliot hasn't changed at all since then. He still doesn't try to understand others' illnesses, even after decades.
Calmly stating this, Natalie insisted that Elliot's words were just excuses for the moment.
What? Wait a minute. I won't do it again, believe me.
Elliot tried to interject, but Natalie grabbed his arm to stop him. I saw it all back then. That's why I hit you, just like Dad did. Remember how you cried and apologized to me after Dad scolded you? You said you wouldn't do it again, that you had woken up and realized your mistake. But now you're doing the same thing to Anita that you did to me before. It's too convenient to say believe me after doing the same thing twice. It's unbelievable. With Natalie's admonishment, Elliot bit his lip in frustration. As Elliot fell silent, Cassie grabbed my shoulders and said,
That's why you need to divorce Elliot and escape quickly, otherwise you'll continue to suffer. Now's your chance with me and Natalie here. Alone with you, he'll never admit his faults. You might even get angry for embarrassing him in front of his parents.
Her eyes were filled with determination. It was sad to hear such words from a mother. The thought of divorce at this age was daunting, but after hearing Cassie's story, I felt I couldn't continue with Elliot. Despite the harsh treatment I had endured, believing that once my symptoms subsided, we could live happily as before, but I realized it would probably only get worse. Anger surged within me as I thought about Elliot's past verbal abuse towards Cassie. I stood up, enduring my ongoing dizziness, and looked straight at Elliot to express my intention to divorce. Elliot shaking off Natalie's hand.
What the hell? Are you all treating me as the bad guy?
Exclaimed. Everyone in the room looked at Elliot with cold eyes. Being scorned even by his relatives, Elliot turned red with rage. Then he said,
Fine, I get it. If you say so, I'll divorce you.
In his anger, he agreed to the divorce. The dinner party was canceled. Cassie and the others went home, and Elliot stayed at a hotel. Our divorce proceeded without any disputes over property division, and was finalized smoothly. Soon after, I separated from Elliot and focused on recovering my health alone. Half a year later, having had no contact since, I received a call from Elliot. I had moved out, rented an apartment, and lived alone, regularly visiting the hospital. I was feeling less stressed and healthier, but Elliot's call gave me a bad feeling. As expected, Elliot's call was utterly selfish. He had a chronic illness that worsened after our divorce and living alone. However, he had always boasted about perfectly managing his health himself. He had even berated me, claiming I was a lazy person who didn't really want to get better because my symptoms weren't improving. Why is that happening? You can manage your own health perfectly, right? I replied, but I knew the reason. Elliot's idea of self-management was shallow, just choosing balanced meals from what I prepared. He never cooked from scratch because I had planned the menus considering his health. Moreover, Elliot, who never did any housework, had a terrible lifestyle in the past 6 months. relying on delivery or ready meals, not vacuuming, leading to a decline in living conditions. Such an unhealthy diet and unsanitary environment would indeed ruin anyone's health.
I can't live like this anymore, so I want you to take care of me. It's been half a year. Your illness must be cured by now, right?
Elliot said without any remorse. Apparently, he first turned to Natalie and Cassie, but Natalie was already busy caring for Cassie and couldn't help. Elliot, desperate, contacted me. Though I wanted to refuse, he was my former husband of many years. I wanted to ignore him, knowing everything.
Then at least look at these albums I found in the storage. If you don't need them, I'll throw them away.
But Elliot said. Believing they were old photos, I hesitated. Though I've had enough of him now, back then, my relationship with Elliot was good, and there were pictures with Cassie's family too. Deciding to go and select my own photos, I visited our former home for the first time in half a year. The house we'd lived in until 6 months ago seemed dirtier than before, perhaps due to lack of cleaning. Leftover takeout containers cluttered the table, making me grimace involuntarily.
You know, without you here, I don't have time to clean. It's hard to move when I feel bad.
Elliot made excuses without any provocation. While he claimed to feel unwell, he seemed quite energetic at a glance. Moreover, despite wanting care, what Elliot really seemed to need was someone to clean, do laundry, and prepare meals. It just seemed like he wanted a housekeeper. After a moment of thought, "You don't look injured and seem quite healthy. Why don't you stop being lazy and take care of yourself?" I said. Elliot narrowed his eyes sullenly and retorted,
You know my illness affects my internal organs and nerves, right? Don't judge by appearances. It's outrageous that you call me lazy when I'm suffering so much.
He spat these words out. Seeing my cold gaze, Elliot visibly became unsettled. Then he stopped moving abruptly. With widened eyes, he took a deep breath and apologized to me.
I said those harsh things to you when you were suffering. I'm truly sorry. I deeply regret it and won't do it again. So please.
I anticipated his next words and firmly interrupted. Sorry, but I can't take care of you. I'm still not over my menopausal disorder, and I can't trust your remorse. A desperate Elliot apologized profusely.
Please, I could end up in the hospital any time because my condition might worsen. I continue with medication, but proper diet management is essential, and I'm in trouble without you. Please, I'm begging you.
His apology seemed heartfelt. However, I knew from Cassie that this could just be a performance. She said that's what he does when he wants to make you seem heartless for not forgiving him after a deep apology. Remembering Cassie's words, I gently declined. I was overwhelmed with my own issues and not in a state to care for someone else. Living with Elliot again and taking care of him would only worsen my menopausal symptoms due to stress. I had just started to stabilize and didn't want to return to square one. I can't. If you really need care, use home care services or a helper. That's beyond me. I explained these options to Elliot, who was still pleading, and made it clear that I couldn't care for him and had no intention of living together again. Then I returned to my own life. Since then, my symptoms have settled, and I've returned to work after a hiatus. Though I considered retiring at one point, I needed to support myself living alone. I always found fulfillment in my job, and despite a 2-year and a few months gap, returning to work felt good. I have no intention of reconciling with Elliot or considering remarriage at this time. However, I still keep in touch with Elliot's family and occasionally meet them for meals. The regular family dinners, a long-standing tradition of Elliot's family, were discontinued after this incident. I also heard that Elliot, for some reason, quit his job. He claimed it was to focus on treatment, but his hospital visits haven't increased, nor has his diet improved. He seemed to be living on his early retirement funds for now. Yet he appears to be living in fear of an uncertain future due to his illness. I'm determined to take care of my health and live a fulfilling life for the remainder of my days.